The day after my husband's funeral, his wealthy family told me I could go live with the strays. They disowned me, kicked me out of my home, and as a final, cruel insult, gave me the deed to their rotting, abandoned animal shelter. 6 months later, they came back to sell the worthless land, but they weren't expecting the mayor of the town to be there. Before we get into the details of that horrible day, I have a question for you. Are you a dog person or a cat person? Let me know in the comments below. It always makes me smile to see the answers. Okay, let's get back to it. The Davenport mansion felt colder than I had ever known it to be. The funeral for my husband, my beloved Michael, had been the day before, a grand theatrical affair orchestrated by his father to showcase the family's prominence rather than to genuinely mourn the wonderful man we had lost. Now I sat in the cavernous, mahogany-paneled study, a single, small teacup trembling in my hands, facing the two people who had made my life a living hell since the day I had fallen in love with their son, my father-in-law, Mr. Henry Davenport, and my sister-in-law, Caroline. Mr. Davenport sat behind his massive, ornate desk like a king on his throne. He was a man built of sharp angles and cold, hard currency. He had never approved of me. I was not from the right family, had not attended the right schools. I was, in his eyes, the commoner who had distracted his brilliant son from his true destiny, running the family's global shipping empire. "Grace," he began, his voice devoid of any warmth or sympathy. "Now that the unpleasant formalities are concluded, we have some business to discuss." Beside him, Caroline, his daughter, looked on with a smug, vulture-like anticipation. She was a perfect, polished product of her father's world, a woman whose heart seemed to be as empty as her social calendar was full. Michael's passing was a tragedy, a great loss to this family and to the future of our company, a future he chose to abandon. He paused, his cold gray eyes pinning me to my seat. My son was a titan. He was bred for leadership, but he was also a man who allowed his sentimentality to rule him. He gave up his birthright, his place at the head of this table, for a quieter, simpler life with you. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low, accusatory growl. That stress, Grace, the stress of disappointing his family, of walking away from his destiny, it weakens a man. It broke his spirit. You were a distraction he could not afford. His death, while tragic, was the inevitable result of a choice he made 5 years ago, the choice he made when he chose you. The accusation was so monstrous, so profoundly cruel that I couldn't even form a response. He was blaming me for my own husband's death. "Therefore," he said, steepling his fingers, "the family has decided that your connection to the Davenports is now and forever severed. You are no longer welcome in this house. You will be given 1 hour to pack a single suitcase with your personal effects. A car will be waiting to take you wherever it is you plan to go. Your access to all joint accounts has already been revoked." I just stared at him, my mind a numb white void. Caroline, seeing my shock, let out a small, cruel laugh. "But we are not without a certain sense of charity," he said, a thin, mirthless smile touching his lips. He nodded to the family lawyer, who had been standing silently in the corner. The lawyer stepped forward and placed a single folded document on the desk. "Your late husband was always fond of lost causes," he continued. "So we have decided to leave you with one of his. This is the deed to the old Davenport Pet Sanctuary, a worthless, derelict property on the edge of the county that has been a drain on our tax bill for a decade. We are, in an act of generosity, transferring ownership to you. It is your inheritance." I looked at the deed, then back at their cold, triumphant faces. It was Caroline who delivered the final venomous blow. She leaned forward, her eyes glittering with a lifetime of malice. "We thought it was fitting," she said, her voice a sweet, poisonous whisper. "You can go live with the other strays." An hour later, I stood on the grand, sweeping driveway of the mansion, a single suitcase at my feet, the deed to a ruin clutched in my hand. I was homeless, penniless, and my heart was a shattered wreck. They had taken everything from me. They had taken my husband, they had taken my home, and they had tried to take my dignity. As the taxi pulled away, I looked back at the grand house, a place I had tried so hard to belong to. They thought they were sending me to a graveyard, a place to be forgotten, a place to let my grief consume me. They had no idea they were sending me to the one place on earth where I could find 1,000 tiny beating hearts to help me heal my own. The taxi driver, a kind man with sad eyes, helped me with my single suitcase and left me at the end of a long, overgrown gravel driveway. "Are you sure this is the place, ma'am?" he asked, his voice full of a gentle concern that was more than I had received from my own family. I had just nodded, unable to speak, and watched him drive away, leaving me alone with my inheritance. I stood before the rusted wrought iron gate, a monument to a forgotten and failed charity. A faded, peeling sign hung crookedly from one hinge. It read, "The Davenport Pet Sanctuary." My husband's name, my name, now a symbol of this derelict, heartbreaking place. The irony was a fresh, sharp pain in my chest. My in-laws hadn't just disowned me, they had given me a physical manifestation of their opinion of me. A worthless, abandoned thing left to rot on the edge of the county. The gate was chained, but the lock was so rusted that it crumbled in my hands. I pushed it open, the screech of the metal a protest that echoed in the eerie silence. I walked down the driveway, the gravel crunching under my feet. The place was a ruin. The main kennel building had broken windows, its paint peeling away in long, leprous strips. The outdoor runs were a jungle of thorns and weeds, their chain-link fences sagging and broken. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth, mildew, and a profound, lingering sadness. I found the key my aunt had so contemptuously given me and unlocked the main office door. The room I stepped into was a time capsule of neglect. A thick layer of dust covered everything. A desk was overturned, its drawers rifled through. Old, yellowed paperwork was scattered across the floor, stirred into a gentle, ghostly dance by the breeze from the open door. It looked as though it had been abandoned in a hurry decades ago. My first thought was that the place was empty, but then I heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible sound. A low, pathetic whimper coming from the kennel area at the back. My heart, which I thought had been shattered into pieces too small to feel anything, gave a painful lurch. I made my way through the dark, debris-strewn corridor, my steps echoing ominously. I pushed open the heavy door to the main kennel, and the smell of animal distress hit me. A smell I will never forget. Most of the cages were empty, their doors hanging open, but not all of them. In the very last kennel, a large, ancient golden retriever lifted his head, his cloudy eyes looking at me with a mixture of terror and a heartbreaking flicker of hope. He was skeletal, his beautiful coat matted with filth. Beside him was a half-empty bag of dry food that had been torn open and a bucket of green, stagnant rainwater. They hadn't even had the decency to take him with them when they had closed this place down. They had just left him here to die. My grief, my own personal, selfish grief, vanished in that instant. It was replaced by a surge of pure, focused, and white-hot fury. I was no longer a widow. I was no longer a disowned daughter-in-law. I was a rescuer. That first night, I did not sleep in the dusty office. I found a bag of old blankets in a storage closet, dragged them into the kennel, and I slept on the cold concrete floor next to the old dog, my hand resting on his bony back, whispering to him that everything would be okay. In the morning, I found others, a terrified, three-legged cat hiding in the rafters of the shed, and a litter of 4 tiny, shivering kittens, their eyes barely open, huddled together for warmth in an old, rusted filing cabinet. These were my people now, my family, the strays. The weeks that followed were the hardest of my life. My silent sacrifice was no longer an emotional one of enduring my in-laws' cruelty. It was a physical sacrifice of my own comfort, my own needs, for the sake of these abandoned creatures. I moved into the small, cold office, sleeping on a lumpy cot I'd found. I used the small amount of cash I had in my purse to buy giant bags of pet food and cleaning supplies. My days became a grueling, monotonous routine. I scrubbed the years of filth from the kennels. I mended the broken fences with scrap wire I found in the shed. I spent hours gently coaxing the terrified, three-legged cat to trust me, offering him small pieces of my own meager meals.
Take it.
I was utterly and completely alone, and there were moments of profound, soul-crushing despair. I remember one night sitting on the cold office floor eating a can of cold beans for dinner and just crying. I cried for my husband, for the life we had lost, for the cruelty of the world. But then the old golden retriever, who I had named Michael after my late husband, limped over and rested his heavy, beautiful head on my lap, looking up at me with his wise, kind eyes. And I knew I couldn't give up. My secret weapon was not a skill I had known I possessed. It was born of sheer desperation. I knew I couldn't do this alone forever. I used the last of my money to get a cheap, prepaid internet connection for the office. I took out my phone and I started a simple social media page. I called it the Grace Pet Sanctuary. I didn't post pictures of sad, pathetic animals begging for pity. I posted stories of resilience. I wrote about Michael, the old warrior who had survived abandonment and was now learning to trust again. I wrote about Trinity, the three-legged cat, and her fierce, independent spirit. I wrote about the 4 kittens who I named Hope, Faith, Charity, and Love. I didn't ask for money. I just shared our story, our small, quiet struggle to create a place of safety in a world that had thrown us away. At first, there was only silence. Then, a few followers trickled in, a like here, a share there. The first donation came a week later. It was a $20 transfer through a payment app from an elderly woman in Oak Haven. The message attached simply said, "For the animals. Thank you for what you're doing." I sat there, staring at that small, miraculous donation, and I wept again. But these were not tears of sadness. They were tears of a fragile, burgeoning hope. A few days later, a high school student, a girl named Sarah, who followed the page, showed up at the gate with a bag of dog food. I wanted to help, she'd said shyly. She came back the next weekend and she brought 2 of her friends with her. The local baker started dropping off a bag of day-old bread and pastries every morning. The seeds of a community were being planted in the barren soil of my despair. My in-laws had given me this place as an insult, a graveyard for my future. They had intended for me to rot here alone and forgotten, just like the animals they had left behind. They had no idea that in their profound, calculated cruelty, they had accidentally given me a new purpose, a new mission, and the beginnings of a new and far better family. The first few weeks of my new life were a solitary, grueling battle against decay and despair. But the arrival of Sarah, the high school student with a shy smile and a big bag of dog food, was the first sign that I was not entirely alone. She came back the following weekend, and this time she brought two of her friends with her. They were a whirlwind of youthful, optimistic energy. They were not afraid of the dirt or the sadness of the place. They just wanted to help. They scrubbed water bowls, they socialized the terrified kittens, and they started an Instagram account for the shelter, posting adorable, if slightly blurry, photos of the animals. For the first time since my husband Michael's death, I felt a flicker of something other than grief. It was hope. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the community of Oak Haven began to notice us. The trickle of support became a steady, life-giving stream. The baker who dropped off day-old bread began to leave a bag of bacon ends for the dogs as well. A retired carpenter named George showed up one afternoon, looked at my pathetic attempt to patch a fence with scrap wire, shook his head with a gruff chuckle, and returned the next morning with a truck full of lumber and a team of his old work buddies. In a single, miraculous weekend, they rebuilt all of the fences for the outdoor runs, creating safe, secure spaces for the dogs to play. I tried to thank them, my voice thick with tears, but George just waved a dismissive, calloused hand. "Don't mention it, Grace," he'd said. "This town needed a place like this again. We're just glad someone finally had the heart to do it." The most significant turning point came in the form of Dr. Evans, the town's beloved veterinarian. She arrived one day unannounced, her medical bag in hand. She had seen the shelter's social media page. She took one look at my old golden retriever, Michael, and her professional, compassionate eyes saw the truth of his condition. She spent the next 2 hours with him, gently examining his joints, checking his heart, and giving him his first real medical checkup in years. She left me with a course of medication for his arthritis and, more importantly, a sense of hope for his future. She then made me an offer that changed everything. Every Tuesday afternoon, she would close her own clinic an hour early and come to the sanctuary to provide free checkups and basic care for my animals. The Grace Clinic, as the volunteers soon dubbed it, became a cornerstone of our little operation. With the animals now receiving proper care and the shelter itself slowly being rebuilt by a growing army of weekend volunteers, I knew we had to take the next step. We couldn't just be a sanctuary. We had to be a bridge to a new life for these creatures. We needed to host an adoption day. The idea was terrifying. It required a level of organization and public outreach that felt beyond me. It required me to step out from the quiet background of my grief and become a public face, an advocate. But Sarah and her teenage friends, with their boundless social media savvy, were relentless. They designed beautiful posters. They created a viral video series showcasing each adoptable animal's personality. They convinced the local paper to run a small story about the event. The day of our first adoption event, I was a wreck of nerves. We had worked for weeks, cleaning every inch of the facility, grooming every animal, preparing adoption packets. But as the clock ticked towards the opening time, a familiar, cold dread washed over me. What if no one came? What if my in-laws were right? What if this place and I were just a lost cause? And then the first car pulled into our newly repaired gravel driveway. It was a young family with 2 small children. Then another car arrived, and another. Within a half hour, the sanctuary was bustling with more life and happy energy than it had likely ever seen. The entire town, it seemed, had come to support us. I watched, my heart so full it felt like it might burst as miracles happened all around me. I saw Trinity, my fierce, independent, 3-legged cat, who I thought would live with me forever, walk directly up to a quiet, gentle man with a prosthetic leg of his own and begin to purr. It was love at first sight. I saw the 4 kittens, Hope, Faith, Charity, and Love, all adopted together by a family with a big, warm house and even bigger hearts. By the end of the day, we had found loving, permanent homes for over half of our animals. The success of the event brought a new kind of attention. A young, enthusiastic reporter from the regional news station came out the following week to do a human interest story on the miracle at the old Davenport place. They interviewed me on camera. I was terrified, but as I began to talk, not about my own pain, but about the resilience of the animals and the incredible kindness of the Oak Haven community, the words came easily. I told the story of the sanctuary, our story. That night, the remaining volunteers and I gathered in the now clean and comfortable office, huddled around a small, donated television, and watched the story air on the evening news. They had edited it beautifully, with heartwarming shots of the animals and glowing interviews with the volunteers and the families who had adopted them. And there I was, talking about second chances. I looked different. The broken, grieving woman who had arrived here 6 months ago was gone. In her place was a woman who looked strong, a woman who had found a purpose, a leader. As the story ended, the little group of volunteers cheered and hugged me, and that moment, surrounded by my new, true family, I found a profound sense of peace. I had done it. I had built something beautiful and good from the absolute wreckage of my life. I thought in that moment of quiet triumph that the ghosts of the Davenport family had finally been exorcised from this place, that their power to hurt me was gone forever. I had no idea that they were about to come back, armed with lawyers and bulldozers, to try and tear it all down. The months following the news story were a blur of beautiful, chaotic progress. The Grace Pet Sanctuary was no longer my secret, solitary mission. It had become the adopted child of the entire town of Oak Haven. The trickle of support had become a joyful flood. We received enough donations to fully renovate the main kennel building, installing heated floors and a proper ventilation system. A local landscaping company came and, over one long, sunny weekend, transformed the overgrown fields into beautiful, sprawling dog parks and secure, shady catios for the felines. We had a waiting list for volunteers. The sanctuary, once a place of silent despair, was now filled from dawn till dusk with the happy sounds of barking dogs, purring cats, and the cheerful chatter of a community united by a common purpose. I had found my new life, my new family. The ghosts of the Davenports, I believed, had been well and truly exorcised from this land. I was so blissfully absorbed in my new reality that I never saw them coming. It happened on a perfect Saturday afternoon. We were hosting another, even bigger adoption event. The sun was shining, the local radio station had sent a van to do a live broadcast, and the sanctuary was teeming with happy families looking for a new best friend. I was standing near the entrance, my heart full, watching a little girl with bright red pigtails fall in love with the scruffy, one-eyed terrier, when a sleek, black, obscenely expensive-looking car crunched its way up the gravel driveway. My blood ran cold. My father-in-law, Mr. Henry Davenport, and my sister-in-law, Caroline, emerged from the car. They were followed by a man in a sharp-tailored suit who oozed an aura of ruthless corporate efficiency. They looked at the scene of joyful, chaotic community, the families, the volunteers, the happy animals, not with wonder, but with a look of profound, undisguised disgust, as if they had just stumbled upon a peasant revolt on their royal property. I felt the familiar cold knot of dread tighten in my stomach, but then I felt a new sensation, the quiet, steadying presence of my community around me. The volunteers, sensing the shift in atmosphere, began to gravitate towards me. I was not alone anymore. I walked over to meet them, my steps even, my head held high. "Henry, Caroline," I said, my voice cool and polite, "this is an unexpected surprise." "Grace," my father-in-law began, his tone a low, dismissive growl, "a commendable little hobby you seem to have cultivated here, but playtime is over." He gestured to the man in the suit. "This is Mr. Sterling, a developer. We have just accepted his very generous offer to purchase this land. He plans to break ground on a new luxury condominium development next month. The world seemed to stop. The happy chatter of the event faded into a dull roar in my ears. I looked at the faces of my volunteers, their smiles replaced by looks of shocked disbelief. "I can't," I whispered, my voice trembling. "This place, it's a home now, for these animals, for this community." Caroline let out a short, cruel laugh. "Don't be so dramatic, Grace. It's a patch of dirt with a bunch of stray animals on it, and now it's a very, very valuable patch of dirt. I'm sure you can find another dump to take them to, or just let them loose in the woods. They're just animals after all." Her words, so full of a casual, unthinking cruelty, sent a shockwave through the crowd of volunteers who had overheard. But before I could even formulate a response, Mr. Davenport stepped forward and handed me a thick, official-looking envelope. He said, "This is your formal 30-day eviction notice. The deal is done." It was in that moment of absolute, crushing despair, as I stared at the eviction notice, that a second, much more welcome car pulled into the driveway. It was the modest sedan of our town's mayor, a wonderful, energetic woman named Mayor Thompson. She was followed by the same local news crew that had filmed our first story. She was beaming, completely unaware of the tense drama she had just walked into. "Grace," she called out, walking towards us. "Sorry we were a bit late. We just had to get the final proclamation printed and framed." She stopped when she saw the grim faces of the Davenports and the developer. "Oh," she said, her smile faltering. "Am I interrupting something?" "As a matter of fact, you are," Mr. Davenport said gruffly. "This is a private business matter." "Well," the mayor said, her smile returning, now with a sharp political edge as she sensed the situation. "This is a matter of public interest." She turned to the news camera. "I'm here today, on this beautiful afternoon, to celebrate a true local hero, Grace Miller, a woman who in just 6 short months has transformed a place of neglect into the beating heart of our community." She turned to me, her eyes shining with genuine admiration. "Grace, your compassion and your tireless work have inspired this entire town. You have reminded us what it means to be a community, to care for those who cannot care for themselves." She then held up a large, beautifully framed document for the camera to see. "And so," she announced, her voice ringing with a proud, official finality, "in recognition of your incredible service and to protect the wonderful institution you have built from the ground up, I am so proud to announce that the Oak Haven City Council has voted unanimously in a special session this morning to declare this property, the 12 acres of the former Davenport estate, a protected historic and community landmark. It can never be sold for private commercial development." The developer, Mr. Sterling, stared at the mayor, then at the Davenports, his face a mask of cold, professional fury. "You told me this land was clear of all zoning restrictions," he snarled at my father-in-law. "You have wasted my time." Without another word, he turned, got in his car, and sped away, the deal dead and buried. My father-in-law and sister-in-law stood there, their faces a mixture of pure, impotent rage and utter disbelief. Their final cruel plan to erase me, to profit from my pain, had been thwarted by the very community I had built in my exile. The crowd of volunteers and supporters erupted in a massive, joyous cheer. Mayor Thompson then handed me a second, smaller plaque. It read, "Oak Haven Citizen of the Year, presented to Grace Miller." As my friends hugged me, I looked over their shoulders at my former family. They were trying to slink away back to their car, their faces a picture of public, undeniable humiliation. But I had one last thing to say. "Henry! Caroline!" I called out. They froze, turning back to look at me. I walked towards them, my steps steady, my heart no longer full of pain, but of a quiet, powerful pity. You were right, I said, my voice clear and strong for everyone to hear. You did leave me to go live with the strays. I gestured around at the beautiful, thriving sanctuary, at the happy faces of my new community, at the animals we had saved together. And we built a home, a better one. So for that and for this, I suppose I should thank you. I didn't wait for a reply. I just turned my back on them and walked back to my real family, the family I had chosen, and who had in return chosen me. My vindication wasn't in their defeat. It was in the proof that a home built on compassion and community would always be stronger than a mansion built on greed. What a beautiful and powerful story about the strength of community and the impact one person's kindness can have. It's a perfect reminder that family is more than just blood. This story shows the best of humanity. Have you ever been part of a community that came together for a good cause? Share your story in the comments below. We'd love to read it. If you were inspired by Grace's journey and the incredible community of Oak Haven, please show your support by hitting that like button and be sure to subscribe for more heartwarming stories of karma and vindication. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.